Okay, so this video is to go over the answer for problem 1.3 in the Hoover textbook. In chapter 1, they introduced a basic Keynesian consumption function here. And so let me just reproduce it here. This is in your textbook. It's figure 1.2. And what you've got is you've got a relationship between GDP, or Y, or output. And on the other corner here, you have the components of GDP. In this case, our function only includes consumption and investment. And then there's a couple different lines. First of all, there's a 45-degree line. Okay, and what this line represents is what they call equation 1.3. So this is equation 1.3, but all it says at 45 degrees is that every point along this line, y exactly equals c plus I. Okay, so whatever is any point here, any point along this 45-degree line satisfies that this y is equal to the combination of c plus I. Okay, so this was equation 1.3 is what they called it. And then there's some gray lines, and the gray lines, let's see if I can get back to the tool here, right, have not quite a 45-degree slope, but something a little bit less to represent the fact that we don't think that people consume 100% of their income, right? In fact, we know from equation 1.1 that we think that people consume about 95% of their income. Oops, sorry, that should be they consume 95% of their income. So that was equation 1.1. Okay, sometimes we refer to that as the marginal propensity to consume, or how much of your income you spend and how much of it you save. In this case, if you're given $100, this equation tells us we expect that you spend 95 and save 5. Now that $5 of saving has a multiplier effect throughout the economy. And then they rewrite the equation. Nope, they didn't rewrite it at all. Okay, just following along with what they've done there. Now we add an investment. Okay, so we knew that ultimately your consumption is only a part of your GDP, that savings is reinvested in the financial system and turns into investment. I'll find my tools here. Here we go. So we're going to add investment, and investment's going to be a shift here. So the red line and the gray line should be parallel, and the red line, so I can keep my colors straight here, has the same slope as the other line, okay? But it has an intercept of, in this case, the book gave you an example of 50. Okay, we call this equation 1.4, and they assumed that investment equals 50. That was our starting point. Okay, and so what's going on here then is this intercept here, this right here, is a height of 50. Okay, we shifted up by 50, and then the slope was the same. All right, what we're solving for, get my pencil, is we're solving for an equilibrium, and the equilibrium is the point that satisfies both equations. Okay, that satisfies what we know to be true here with what we know to be true here. So we have two equations and two unknowns, and we have to solve for this point here. And actually, they sort of creatively already did a little bit of rearranging, right? Part of why I got confused when I was trying to answer this in our Google Hangout was that I had rewritten this. I hadn't rewritten this with this transformation already done. Okay, so whatever, you don't care how I messed up. You just want to know what the right answer is. Right, but we can use this then to solve for what exactly is the steady state GDP. What exactly is this right here? So let's just solve this equation because they've already plugged in for C here. So solve this sucker. Solve this. Okay, and if we solve this for Y, let me see if I can do that for you. Right, if we're solving this sucker for y, we can subtract 0.95y from both sides, so we get this is equal to 50, and we get y is equal to 1,000, which is exactly what they labeled. Okay, so if you look back in your textbook, they've labeled y as 1,000 right here. So y is equal to 1,000. Okay, so that's our starting point. And then the question says, okay, now what happens to GDP, to income, to output here if we kick up the investment a little bit more? What if, instead of an investment of 50, we made an investment of 60? Okay, so that yellow line is parallel again, and the only change is, oops, there we go. All right, do this. The only change is we've added 10 more investment. Okay, we pushed the intercept up a little bit. So what's changed about our equations over here is, instead of the red equation, or the yellow is really hard to see, I apologize here. I'll switch it to like an orange. Okay, so that corresponds with the yellow line. The slope's the same, and now the intercept is 60. Okay, so I'll be a little anal retentive here and see if I can select this thing. Oh, I want to select this. No, won't let me do it. Oh, maybe I can write over it. This is me just being anal retentive and wanting the orange to match the orange. There we go. Okay. There we go. So the orange line here, and now we can solve this sucker for y. So solve this for y. And when we do that, let's see if I can do that for you here. We're going to get, subtract 0.95 from each side again. So we have 0.05y, but now instead of 50, it's equal to 60, and we get y equal to 1,200. So what we have found on the graph is we have found this new equilibrium, this new steady state, where the orange line crosses the 45-degree line, and we found that GDP is 1,200. Which is what we were expecting. We were expecting to see GDP grow from the investment. And what's interesting here is when we get through the algebra and we solve the equations, the policy takeaway is that we increased investment by 10, and yet we increased GDP by 200. Okay, and this is what we call a multiplier effect. This is now I'm just sort of free-forming. You may have, if you teach macro or an intro macro, you may read about the multiplier effect. So that if there's a infusion of government spending or some sort of investment infusion or some sort of change in the tax law that incentivizes a spending infusion, whatever happens, the multiplier effect is 1 over 1 minus the marginal propensity to consume. You may have seen this before. This is a big maybe. But this marginal propensity to consume is this 95% that we've been working with. So it's 1 over 1 minus 95%, or 1 over 5%, which is 20, right? Which tells us that $1 of new spending will yield $20 of GDP growth. Okay, so this is where we get, the argument behind stimulus, Keynesian stimulus. If you throw $10 in, you'll get 200, right? So $10 leads to $200 growth. Okay, so if you can infuse $10, you can increase GDP by 200 because of that multiplier effect. So hopefully that helps. I will quickly, let's do a new one. Sure, we'll save this real quick, just in case we need it later. Multiplier. Okay, then the next thing they have you do, and I'll just get you started on this one, is they say, look, now you've got the same setup. You've got your 45-degree line here, and instead of changing the intercept, oops, what they're going to have you change here, let me get a new line, is, well, this was the gray line, and instead of, what were my colors before? I can't remember. trying to do too much in one video. There, that was the red line. Okay, and the shift up was 50. So they say keep that same shift, but instead of adding investment, what happens if we change the slope? Okay, and the slope is that marginal propensity to consume. What happens if we change the slope of the gray and the red line here? And specifically, they ask you in question 1.3 to change the marginal propensity to consume from 0.95 to 0.90 and see what happens. So I'm not going to solve this one for you because I want to leave a little bit of work for you to solve. You can use those same equations as before. My hint is going to be that if you save more money, then that's less money circulating and less money multiplying throughout the economy. And that 1 over 1 minus the marginal propensity to consume, we're going to get a smaller multiplier. Okay, we're going to get 0.90, which is 1 over 1/10, which is 10. So now we're going to find that $1 of spending or investment or government spending, whatever it is, will lead to only $10 of growth. So my hint, and you'll know you're on the right track, is that our initial intersection here was that GDP, this is GDP here, was 1,000. That's where we started. And if we move the slope of this line, if we flatten it out, it's going to go back. We're going to have a smaller GDP because we're not pushing as much money through the economy. And I think I solved it, and it comes out to 500. So just as long as we're going to ... y will equal 500. So I'll give you that. All right, and I look for you to kind of talk through and explain in your answer. Hopefully that helped. Feel free to touch base if it didn't, and I'll keep trying to explain it.